The novel was described by no less a writer than Hemingway as being the source of all modern American literature. Yet the book, on its first publications in the US, was banished from Concord Public Library as being the veriest trash, as having no reliable sense of propriety, as a rough, coarse, and intelligent, more suited to the slum than to intelligent, respectable people. Huckleberry Finn is now an acknowledged classic that has been filmed no less than 6 times, televised and turned into a strip cartoon and an opera. Huck's journey on a raft down the Mississippi in the company of runaway slave has become legendary. But the ending of the novel has been found wanting and has caused considerable discussion among critics, with Lionel Trilling and T.S. Eliot journeying in the debate, so much so that spoof of it has been done under the title The True Adventure of Huckleberry Finn 1970 by John Seeley. In the introduction to the book, Hucks tells us that one 20th century critic said the book Huckleberry Finn was sloppy but together, and so he decided to pick up the part, the good one, and put together one they would like. Hucks goes on to say, now that they have got their book, maybe they will leave the other one alone. The novel has long been known as anti-racist book, with Mark Twain's sympathies lying on the side of Jim. But recently the book has been denounced as being racist because of Huck's frequent and apparently unthinking uses of the word nigger for Jim. As a result, there has been demand by some African American that a book be withdrawn from the school curriculum. The wheel has apparently come full circle. As you see, these apparent contradictions take you right into the heart of the novel and touch up many of the issues that have exercised the mind of readers about it in recent time. The book is very much alive and its adventures continued. The debate for and against following young people free access to Huckleberry Finn has been fictionalized in Nat Hantoff in his book The Day That Came to Arrest the Book in 1982 on the ground of racism, sexism, and immorality. And we are going to study about this is what we are talking about Huckleberry Finn. Since every novel is proudest of its time, you need to place Huckleberry Finn in the socio-cultural context of 19th century America. Huckleberry Finn, though published in 1885, remember, Huckleberry Finn, published in 1885, deals with the period of 40 or 50 years ago, which means that it depicts a period before American North clashed with the South in the Civil War 1861 to 65. Fought principally over the issues of slavery and states' rights. Slavery, which is most important focus in the novel, has been abolished almost 20 years before. In 1865, the novel was published in the US. But addition of slavery did not mean that disappearance of attitude that were associated with it. The text of the novel used in the study material that is given in the Cambridge University Press edition by Jane Ogborn in the Cambridge Literature series, published in 1995. All reference to the text will be indicated by both the chapter's number and page number of the facilitate reference. So you remember, this is what I repeat, the Cambridge University Press edition edited by Jane Ogborn in the Cambridge Literature series, published in 1995. Between the end of the Civil War, 1865, the World War I, American society witnessed several momentous change. These were perhaps the single most important change took place as a result of massive industrialization. From a rural agrarian isolated republic consisting largely of farm villages and small towns, America became in the course of 5 decades an industrialized, urbanized, and continental nation, a world where there had come to term with Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest and with proudest changes in its cultural values and social institutions. With industrialization came the growth of American cities. By the turn of century, only about one-third of the population lived on farms. By the end of World War First, one half of the American population lived in a dozen or so cities. The country's population grew phenomenally from 31 million to 1862, 131 million in 1940, with masses of men moving westward. The exodus reached its peak during 1860 and 1920. American immigration agent attempted European with promise of free land for the taking and offer to the transport them to the dollar land for the little as $35. Control over industries passed into the hands of fewer and larger companies. In the last 2 decades of the 19th century, a very small number of men controlled steel, railroad, oil, meat, packaging industries without significant competition. With these came a new generations of captains of industries and masters of capitals. These were also called buccaneers and robber barons. Buccaneers and robber barons, Buccaneers and robber Barons. Most of the wages earned were employed by corporation and big business houses. The massive industrialization resulted in widespread prosperity, but prosperity was achieved at great social and psychological cost. Industrial conflict became organized and often violent. Racial slavery had been abolished as a result of Abraham Lincoln's proclamation of emancipation, but the attitude associated with it survived. To an extent that they still do. For detail of events, book and persons connected with slavery in the US in 19th century, please read section 6 of the unit. The post-Civil War America does not figure prominently in Mark Twain's novels except The Gilded Age, The Tale of Today, 1873, with which he wrote in collaboration with C.D. Warner. Both the Tom Sawyer, 1876, and Huckleberry Finn, 1885, are set in the pre-Civil War period, an era he was inclined to idolize. In both, he goes back to his childhood memories, but so far as Huckleberry Finn is concerned, the question is, does this idealization apply to Twain's handling of the black-white relationship in the novel? Let's talk about the chronology of important dates of Mark Twain. 1835, November 30, he born Florida, Missouri. 1839, the Clement family moved to Hannibal, Missouri. 1847, Father John Marshall Clement died. 1848 to 54, worked as printer on various Hannibal newspapers. 1855 to 57, worked as printer in St. Louis, New York, Philadelphia, etc. 1857 to 61, Cub pilot and pilot on Missouri steamboat. 1861 to 62, prospects in Nevada. Sam Clement was his father and Olivia L. Clement was his mother. So 1862 to 64, worked as reporter and correspondent for Virginia City Territorial Enterprise. 1864 to 66, worked as reporter and freelancer writers at San Francisco newspaper and magazine. 1865 November, Jim Smiley and his Jumping Frog, published in Saturday Press, New York. 1866 March-August, corresponding in Sandwich Island of Sacramento Union, correspondent for San Francisco, Alta California, New York. 1867 June-November, Quaker City excursion to Europe and Phila and Palestine. 1867 to 69 and 1869, miscellaneous newspapers, correspondence and lecturing. Innocents Abroad published and met William Dale. Howells, 1870, married Olivia Langdon of Elmira, New York, settled in Buffalo, editor of Express. 1872, Roughing It's published, lecture tour in England. 1873, The Gilded Age as novel in collaboration with Charles Dudley Warner, second lecture tour in England. 1875, Sketches New and Old. 1876, The Adventure of Tom Sawyer. 1878-79, extended visit to Germany, Switzerland, Italy, a tramp abroad. 1881, began investment in Paris, a typesetting machine. 1882, The Prince and the Pauper. 1883, Life on Mississippi. 1884-85, toured as a program of platform reading with George W. Cable. Established Charles L. Webster and Company. Published. 1884, Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, published in England. 1884, December, Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, published in England. 1885, Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, published in America by his own firm. 1889, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur Court. 1891-95, residence in Germany, Italy, France with business trips back to United States. 1894, Page typesetter pronounced a failure, Webster Company bankrupt. 1894, The Tragedy of Portishead Wilson novel. 1895-96, lecture tour through South Hampshire. 1896, personal recollection of Joan of Arc. 1896, August, favorite daughter Susie dies of meningitis. 1897 to 1900, residence in Vienna and London. 1897, following the equator. 1900, The Man That Corrupt Hadleyburg and Other Stories, took house in New York, active with Howell's anti-imperialism campaign. 1900, Little D, conferred by Yale University. Doctorate of Literature. 1902, Doctorate of Literature conferred by University of Missouri. 1903, moved with family to Italy for his wife's health. 1904, Olivia Langdon Clement died in Italy. 1906, What a Man. 1907, Doctorate of Literature conferred by Oxford University. 1908, took up residence at Stormford near Reading Connections. 1909, daughter Jane died. 1910, died at Stormfield, buried at Elmira. 1916, The Mystery Stranger. Some highlights of Mark Twain's career. For important landmark in Mark Twain's life, please refer to the chronology given above. But these are the important things of Mark Twain. In the best edition of American, Mark Twain was many things: a printer, riverboat pilot, journalist, humorist, lecturer, publisher, businessman, soldier, beside being a writer. Mark Twain, the pen name adopted by Samuel Langhorne Clement, as a nautical expression used by leadsmen on steamboats for a depth of water. Mark Twain, the pen name adopted by Samuel Langhorne Clement. So Mark Twain's original name was Samuel Langhorne Clement. It literally means to mark, which means 2 fathoms or 12 feet. The 2 fathom depth is divided line between safe and dangerous shallow water for steamboats. Sam assumed this public person early 1863. Thereafter, almost all of his works appeared under the adopted name, though generally inserted Samuel L. Clement within brackets on the title page of his book. The cover, the first edition of Huckleberry Finn, however, carried pen name Mark Twain only. Mark Twain was more than a mere pseudonym. It was a new identity, a new image, a Clement deliberately cultivated with the help of well-placed interviewed and lectures, tours, magazine, article, books published, gestures, and good works. He achieved of fame, wealth, luxury, friends, and highest circle. He also found fame's shortcomings, endless requests for money and autographs, the absence of privacy and loss of self to public. This last, most subtle demon of fame proved inescapable. When Samuel Langhorne Clement tired of being Mark Twain, he could not destroy him. Mark Twain was no less a cultural phenomena than a writer. He first attracted notice as a humorist, and his comic stage perform as were integral part of his person as a man. Much was that he wrote. Then he gradually changed into a distinguished writer and finally became a social philosopher. In other words, Mark Twain person continued to grow and change. Samuel Clement wanted to be rich and famous. He wanted to replicate Art Musward success as a humorist on the stage. Eventually, he became one of the great speakers of the era and delivered nearly 1,000 lectures and speeches in person of Mark Twain. During his lecture tour, he came to India also in 1896 and spent 2 months here. During this period, he visited Bombay, Allahabad, Varanasi, Calcutta, among other places. Mark Twain's writing and speaking careers were closely intertwined. Just as his success as a writer drove him to the platform, his lecture helped shape him as a writer and also helped him promote his books. So, I repeat this information again. During his lecture tour, he came to India in 1896 and spent 2 months here. During this period, he visited Bombay, Allahabad, Varanasi, Calcutta, among other places. In 1884-5, he gave reading from Huckleberry Finn and other books of his. Mark Twain's writing gave evidence of the awareness of an audience and importance of the spoken word. This is particularly true of Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain began his career as a humorist, as a writer, humor sketches, as a humorous public speaker. His career as a speaker has already been referred to. His retelling of a well-known tale, The Jumping Frog of Calversa's Country, first published in 1865, won his immediate recognition. Later, he wrote several books of travel and adventure, which included Innocents Abroad, 1869, Roughing It, 1872, A Tramp Abroad, 1880, Life on Mississippi, 1883, and Following the Equator, 1897. Here we shall take a close look at 4 novels in the beginning with the Gilded Age, 1873. Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910. Remember, Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910, was the first great American to visit India. He came to India in 1896 at the age of 60 as a part of the Round the World lecture tour. He was fascinated by the sight of India and sounds of India. In Following the Equator, an account of his world tour, when recorded his impression, India, he said, was the cradle of human race, birthplace of human speech, mother and history, grandmother of legend, grandmother of tradition, the one land that all men desire to see, and having once seen by even a glimpse would not give that glimpse for all the shows of the rest of the globe combined. The Gilded Age, 1873. Written in collaboration with C.D. Warner, the novel was a satire on the corruption and obsessive greed of 19th century America. The novel began in a dinner conversation in 1872, during which Sam and his friend berated the novel. Their wives read for their entertainment. The wives responded by challenging the man to produce a better novel. The book, which is combination of satire, melodrama, sentimentality, is now chiefly recommended for this title, and which gave its name to the post-Civil War period that it described. The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, 1876. Twain's first solo venture into the territory of fiction, The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, 1876, is rooted in the memories of his childhood in Hannibal. Described by Mark Twain as a hymn to the bodyhood, it presented an idyllic but unsentimental picture of childhood in pre-Civil War rural America, with mischief, boys' prank, and boy-girl romance. It combined melodramatic events like body snatching, robbery, and murder that match Tom and Huck's boyish imagination. The boys adventure and on triumphant note when Tom reveals in the court who the real murderer is, and when Tom and Huck discover the murderer treasure and become rich. His next book, Huckleberry Finn, 1885, takes off from here he had left off in this book. A Connecticut Yankee in the King Arthur's Court, 1889, a scientific 19th century man finds himself in a primitive world of superstition, faith, and ignorance symbolized by Arthur England, combining humor, wit, a burlesque, literature, parody, and satire. The novel expresses Mark Twain's dislike of the past and the romance and his respect for American crudeness and practicality. But though the novel satirized the stupidity and superstition of Arthurian England, he does not spare his own age. His attack on slavery is one example. Mark Twain's novel Pudd'nhead Wilson, 1894, resembles Tom Sawyer's, 1876, and Huckleberry Finn, 1885, in the beginning set in a small Missouri town modeled on Hannibal before the Civil War. It deals with two of his favorite themes, the first of which is the issue of slavery, which explores more honestly and also directly. The second theme is the effect of environment on the foundation of character, which is studied by resorting to two completely unrelated look-alike slave and free babies and familiar plot device of the changing. Twain's later writing became increasingly dark and bitter. Personal misfortune came in the form of bankruptcy, followed by failure in business venture. Then came a series of bereavement in the family. These misfortunes were responsible, partly at least, for the dark strain of pessimism and despair in his writing. Mark Twain is one in those few writers in the world who have been great and popular both. It is an achievement for him to have narrowed down the gap between the two adjectives. He possessed a marvelous ear for the way people talk. This gives his book as unequaled authenticity. His masterpiece Huckleberry Finn has been called the fountainhead of American colloquial prose. I repeat, the masterpiece Huckleberry Finn has been called the fountainhead of American colloquial prose. Slavery goes back to prehistoric time, as we have read it earlier. This need was met transported by the number of slaves and slave from Africa. These persons of African origin who settled in America, now known as African American, and literature produced by them is called African American literature. Now we are going to study about the African American literature and Negro slavery in U.S. a historical view. Samuel Sewall, a Massachusetts jurist, was among the earliest humanitarians whose book The Selling of Joseph, 1700, was an early appeal against slavery. So the book which is very beginning, we can simply say in 1700, The Selling of Joseph, written by Samuel Sewall. Samuel Sewall wrote The Selling of Joseph in 1700, is an appeal against slavery. His personal solution for the problem of slavery was to pay wages to his slave. George Washington, 1732 to 1799, wished to see the end of slavery by legislative authority, and in his will emancipated his own slaves. The most unforgettable condemnation of Negro slavery in early American literature occurred in Crevecoeur's Letters of an American Farmer, 1782. He said that whites has crucified the blacks and were devouring them. Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826, the author of the American Declaration of the Independence of 1776, was among those who saw the inconsistency between American democracy and Negro slavery. He also foresaw the end of slavery in inherited slaves, and although he freed 5 at his death, and he left many slaves to his descendants. During the first 3 decades of the 19th century, an elaborate ideological development in the South in defense of slavery. Among the defenders who John C. Calhoun, 1782 to 1850, U.S. President, 1825 to 32, and political philosophers who referred to ancient Athens and asserted that slavery offered the firmest basis for splendid culture. Some other beliefs were the Bible nowhere condemned and throughout recognized slavery. Man is born to subjugation. The proclivity of the natural man is to domineer or to be subservient. The Constitution of US effective in 1789 permitted the abolition of foreign slave trade in 1808. The colonization seems to significant part of the anti-slavery movement in the 1820. The Congress gave many money for settling free Negroes and free slaves to Liberia on the west coast of Africa. In 1829, William Layard Garrison, who was only 24, started publishing The Genius. His denunciation of the slave trade earned him a term in the prison and became the first American immediatist, taking the position that although slavery could not be ended immediately, it was the moral duty of the good people to act and talk as though it should and could. He started publishing The Liberator in 1831. The journal closed in December 1865. There has been several slave rebellions. A major rebellion composed of from 60 to 80 slaves was led by Nat Turner in Virginia in August 1831, in which 57 white died. This increased and Southern fear of emancipation doctrine. Nat Turner dictated his confession in prison in 1831. Among the numerous runaway from the slave states into the North, the most notable was Frederick Douglass, 1817 to 1895. Frederick Douglass, 1817 to 1895, a Maryland-born mulatto who escaped in New York in 1838 and became an abolitionist activist. His narrative of life of Frederick Douglass, 1845, became a classic among slave narratives. He was a friend of Mark Twain's father-in-law, who was an abolitionist. Frederick Douglass, whose narratives of the life of Frederick Douglass, 1845, became a classic among slave narratives. He was a friend of Mark Twain's father-in-law, who was an abolitionist. Under the Missouri Compromise, 1850, Missouri was admitted as a slave state, but Maine came in as free state, thus keeping the balance between the North and South of Congress. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it a crime not to report anyone suspected of being an escaped slave. Harriet Beecher Stowe, white woman, wrote The Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1852, to arouse public sentiment against slavery, particularly in Northeast. The book was an immediate success, selling 3 lakh copies in first year. Negro slavery came to an end in USA in 18 December 1865. I repeat, Negro slavery came to an end in USA on 18 December 1865, when the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified. The freeing of the slave, however, did not mean the end of racism, thus fulfilling Alex D. Tocqueville's prophecy that the abolition of slavery would not mean the end of the Negro problem. The reconstruction of the South following the end of Civil War, which meant restoring its proper relationship with the Union, aimed among the other things that assuring the newly emancipated Negro not only his freedom but his political and civil rights. The Reconstruction collapsed in 1877 with the recalling of federal troops from the South. But this came to an end by serious efforts to protect the Negro in this constitutional right. In the word of W.E.B. Du Bois, the slavery went free, stood a brief moment in sun, then moved back again towards slavery. I repeat, in the words of W.E.B. Du Bois, the slavery, and I quote, the slavery went free, stood in a brief moment in sun, then moved back again towards slavery, unquote. Jim Crow is the name of the policy of segregating and discriminating against blacks, especially by law passed in South in late 19th century. This policy was not seriously challenged until after World War II. It was in 19th May 1954 that the US Supreme Court held that it was unconstitutional for the public school to segregate the races. Mark Twain and slavery. Mark Twain grew up in a white slave holding society in which he probably heard the word nigger more often than any other term for African American. Born into a slave culture, Sam assimilated the belief that different skin in color meant a different not only in the caste but in fundamental rights. In his autobiography, Mark Twain says, "In my school days, I had no aversion to slavery. I was not aware that there was anything wrong about it. No one arraigned it in my hearing that local papers said nothing against it. The local pulpit taught us that God approved it. But Sam had a special effect for Uncle Dan, a slave at his uncle's farm at Florida, Missouri. Uncle Daniel was wise and tender, and it was there I got my strong liking for his race and my appreciation for his fine qualities. His father, John Marshall Clement, on a slave. In 1841, he sat at a circuit where jury that sent three abolitionists who had usurped some slave note to free them to the penitentiary. He had received his greatest accolade for his unyielding attitude to slavery. Sam's father-in-law, Joyce Langdon, on the other hand, was a noted abolitionist and a friend of Frederick Douglass, an ex-slave and journalist and a leading abolitionist. The father-in-law played an important part in shaping Sam's anti-slavery attitude later. Mark Twain sent every summer for 19 years from 1871 to 1889 at Elmira, New York. It was here in 1874 that he heard that cook Mary Ann Cobb, an ex-slave, the story of her separation from her husband and children at the auction block and her eventual reunion with a younger child. Mark Twain found it a shameful taste of wrong and hardship and published in the Atlantic Monthly. The story obviously left a lasting impression on Mark Twain's mind, for it demonstrated to him that blacks cared for their children as whites did. The story was to find an echo in the Connecticut Yankee and also in Huckleberry Finn, chapter 23, where Huck reports Jim mourning his separation from his children. Curiously, the entry under Negroes in American Cyclopedia states, Negroes are comparatively insensible to pain. According to Shelley Fisher Fiskin, the most important thing Mary Annie caught Twain was that the vernacular in her case, the grammatical dialects of a woman with no formal education, could move a narrative forward dramatically and effectively. Page 88. Shelley Fisher Fishkin draws attention to the letter written by Mark Twain on 24 December 1885, the year of Huckleberry Finn, published in US, to Dean Francis Wayland of the Yale Law School Engineering to finance the education of a promising black student, Warner T. McGuinn. The letter throws light on Mark Twain's views on racism. We have ground the manhood out of them, the blacks, and shame is ours, not theirs, and we should pray for it. Mark Twain wrote an anti-lynching editorial entitled Only a Nigger in the Buffalo Express in 1869, in which he explores the subject of racism satirically using the rhetoric of the bigot ironically. Here is a sample, only a nigger killed by mistake, that is all. But mistakes will happen even in the conduct and the best regulated and most high-toned mob, and surely there is not good reason why Southern gentlemen should worry themselves with useless regret so long as only an innocent nigger is hanged and roasted or knotted to death now and then. What are the lives of a few nigger in comparison with the impetuous instincts of prude and fury race? Shelley Fisher Fiskin, page 82. But the charge that Huckleberry Finn is a racist book remains. During 1950s, the National Association of Advancement of Colored People NAACP called for the Huckleberry Finn banning from schools and libraries, writing about and by African American before Huckleberry Finn. Novelist David Bradley, author of the Cheneyville incident, referred to Huckleberry Finn 1885 as the first nigger novel, also that it is a work that prefigured the fiction of African American writers in the 19th century, including his own, G. Shady Fishkin. But Harriet Beecher Stowe, immensely popular Uncle Tom's Cabin 1852 came first. With docile Uncle Tom as a central figure, it preached the evils of slavery to a nation that needed to learn Christian humanity. Recent African American scholars have, however, questioned the image of submissive Tom as a role model of African American. African American literature appeared in many forms in early 1800. White abolitionists encouraged writing and publication of slave narratives such as Incidents in the Life of Slave Girl 1861 by Harriet Jacob. Nat Turner, who led a slave rebellion in 1831, told his life story in prison called The Confession of Nat Turner 1831. Frederick Douglass' Narratives of Life of Frederick Douglass 1845 was an autobiography. William Well Brown, The Escape or A Leap of Freedom 1858 was the first African American play. By Harriet Evelson, Our Neck or Sketches from the Life of a Free Black 1859 was the first American novel in America. African American novel in America. So I repeat, this information is very significant for your paper. William Well Brown's Escape or a Leap of Freedom 1858 was the first African American play. William Well Brown's first Escape or Leap of Freedom 1858 was the first African American play, and Harriet Evelson's Our Neck or Sketches from the Life of a Free Black 1859 was the first African American novel in America.